Good evening. Good evening and welcome to Crossroads of Ideas, Wisconsin's role in shaping the future of agriculture. I see some familiar faces, so good to see you this evening. My name is Heather Gayton. I am the Outreach Program Manager for the College of Agricultural and Life Sciences. Today's event is a joint program between UW-Madison's College of Agriculture and Life Sciences and the Wisconsin Science Festival and marks this fall's first installment of the Crossroads of Ideas program series. Crossroads of Ideas is a collaboration between the Wisconsin Institute for Discovery, the Morgridge Institute for Research, and UW-Madison Strategic Communications, and is an opportunity to foster dialogue between the community and UW-Madison researchers. The series addresses issues that matter to all of us and are also the subject of research here at UW-Madison. Since 2014, Crossroads has been a staple of public programming offered at the Discovery Building on UW-Madison's campus. And for this special joint event today, we are excited to help kick off the 14th annual Wisconsin Science Festival as one of the hundreds of events happening throughout Wisconsin over the next 7 days. Before I say more about this evening's event, we will take a moment to acknowledge the land that we occupy here at the Discovery Building. The University of Wisconsin-Madison occupies ancestral Ho-Chunk land, a place their nation has called Teejop since time immemorial. In an 1832 treaty, the Ho-Chunk were forced to cede this territory. Decades of ethnic cleansing followed when both the federal and state governments tried repeatedly, but unsuccessfully, to forcibly remove the Ho-Chunk from Wisconsin. This history of colonization informs our shared future of collaboration and innovation. Today, UW-Madison and all of the Wisconsin Science Festival presenting organizations respect the inherent sovereignty of the Ho-Chunk Nation and the 11 other First Nations of Wisconsin. Couple items worth mentioning of how the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences is putting this land acknowledgement into action. In April, earlier this year, the Center for Integrated Agricultural Systems held an Indigenous Research Forum here in this very room at the Discovery Building, highlighting the meaningful tribal work that requires going beyond standard university approaches to develop a true partnership. A cohort of Indigenous graduate students was also recently funded federally by the Rural Partnerships Institute and $10 million in USDA grant for intertribal food systems. Tonight, we are here to explore crucial ways in which our state is driving innovation and sustainability in one of the most vital sectors, agriculture. From groundbreaking research to practical applications in farming, Wisconsin is truly at the forefront of shaping the future of food production, land use, and environmental stewardship. We are honored to have as our moderator, Dean Glenda Gillaspy. Dr. Gillaspy has served as the 14th Dean for the UW-Madison's College of Agriculture and Life Sciences since August 2022. She holds a Bachelor's of Science in Biology from Auburn University and a PhD in Biochemistry from Case Western Reserve University with postdoctoral experience at UC Berkeley and international research at the Instituto Gulbenkian de Ciência, Institute Gulbenkian of Science in Portugal. Prior to her role at UW, she was a professor and department head of biochemistry at Virginia Tech, where she led academic initiatives and research programs. Her research focuses on phosphate sensing mechanisms in plants, aiming to improve sustainable nutrient management, and she has developed multiple outreach and research opportunities for emerging scientists. Dean Gillaspy brings a wealth of knowledge and insight to this important conversation. Please join me in welcoming her.
Thank you, Heather. Well, welcome, everyone. We have a really exciting conversation that we're going to engage you in tonight. And I am just going to start by saying I'm very excited about the conversation and about our panelists. So I would like all four panelists to come up while I introduce you. So first, we're going to go in this order. Professors Julie Dawson, Sean Connolly, Rebecca Smith, and Randy Jackson. So come up in that order, starting right here. Let's see if they can follow instructions. They can. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and sit down. I'm going to do short introductions. Dr. Julie Dawson is a professor in the Department of Plant and Agroecosystem Sciences here at UW-Madison. She trains students in plant breeding and genetics, horticulture, and agroecology. She leads a project called Seed to Kitchen Collaborative, which works with plant breeders to test varieties with farmers, gardeners, chefs, and other culinary professionals. Welcome, Julie. I changed the order. Okay, Dr. Sean Connolly is a professor and the state soybean and small grain specialist at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He leads the UW Soybean Research Program, aka the UW Bean Team. He actively collaborates across all disciplines to generate science-based solutions to address real-world problems in soybean and small grain production systems. His commitment to agriculture and the Wisconsin idea have also led him to co-author a children's book called Cool Bean the Soybean. Welcome, Sean. Dr. Rebecca Smith is a new assistant professor of translational plant sciences for dairy sustainability, also in the Department of Plant and Agroecosystem Sciences, along with the Dairy Innovation Hub. She's also a researcher with the Wisconsin Energy Institute and the Great Lakes Bioenergy Center. Rebecca's research focuses on how to alter the plant cell wall to improve plant digestibility, animal nutrition, and dairy sustainability. Welcome, Rebecca. And coming in, leading up the rear, we have Dr. Randy Jackson. His grassland ecology group studies how carbon and nutrients flow into, within, and out of grassland ecosystems, including prairie, pasture, and row crop communities. Randy co-leads the Wisconsin Integrated Cropping Systems Trial, WICS, a 34-year-old experiment in Arlington, Wisconsin. He also co-leads Grassland 2.0, a project working to transform agriculture in the upper Midwest to a system that provides for our wants and needs today, while also building capacity for future generations to do the same. Let's welcome these panelists. So we're going to start with a question. Tell us about one thing you're working on right now and how this could break new ground and or engaged stakeholders. And for our conversation tonight, stakeholders are farmers, growers, producers, community members. Julie, we're going to let you go first.
Okay, is this on? Working?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So my position is a joint research extension position. So I am working particularly with farmers that are serving regional food systems and trying to get access to direct markets and regional markets. I work a lot with organic growers and with growers that are trying to build value-added production into their system. So I'm really excited about a new initiative and extension called the Emerging Crops Accelerator. And it ties in with a lot of the work that I've done in plant breeding for organic systems and participatory plant breeding, because the goal is to provide good alternatives to farmers that want to diversify their agricultural system, where there might be new and emerging crops that could give them an extra source of income and a more sustainable crop. I work mostly on hazelnuts with that, but also on organic food grade grains and some with kernza, which is a perennial grain, in addition to work on organic vegetables, which are kind of a staple for direct market local farms.
Great, thank you. Sean.
All right, well, good evening, everyone. My name is Sean. Again, I'm the state soybean specialist here at UW-Madison. I think one of the coolest things that I've been working on right now that actually got me pretty pumped for my next 15 years before I retire, which has got me pumped then too. So what we're working on is called our Boots on the Ground project. So for the last decade, we've been working directly with farmers from not just in Wisconsin, but across the Midwest. And we've been able to collect data from over 8,000 farm fields and over 600,000 acres of land. This has all been amassed into a database. And we've built this program, if you will, that we can then have simulations for farmers. And basically, if anyone is familiar, comes from a farm, you understand that any farmer has roughly 30 to 50 years of research, before they move on, retire, and pass the farm. So having all this data and information, we can run tens of thousands of simulations. And now a farmer can basically drop a pin in any field in the Midwest and run a scenario. If they change certain cropping systems, how does that then change both the economic or profitability of their farm? Or now we're adding cover crops and other sustainability metrics in there as well to kind of look at that. So that's really got me jazzed and excited for the next decade coming forward. So that's what I do.
Hi everyone, I'm Rebecca Smith. Is this on?
I think so.
Okay, good. I'm Rebecca Smith, and as Dean Gillaspy said, I'm a new assistant professor in the Plant and Agroecosystem Sciences Department and with the Dairy Innovation Hub. So the research I'm excited about is the research I will be doing going forward that I'm just starting to work on. I'm really excited to implement some of what I've learned from my basic science background about how this plant cell wall is formed and structured and regulated to try to improve the digestibility of the plant cell wall without negatively impacting how plants grow. And then taking that, being able to feed those plants to cows and see how that improves animal health and nutrition, and then also hopefully improves or decreases methane production by cows as well.
Great.
Good evening, everybody. As Dean Gillaspy mentioned, I helped lead this Wisconsin Integrated Cropping Systems trial. It's now 34 years old. I wasn't around when it got started. The late Josh Posner started it in 1989. He was faculty in our department back then. But his grad student, Greg Sanford, and Janet Hedke, who now runs the West-Madison Research Station, really kept it alive over time. And eventually I ended up as a kind of caretaker for the project. And we've really been building on the long-term data that we're collecting at that experiment, which are really fascinating. And one of the main things we do is compare carbon accumulation in the soil underneath different cropping systems. So we have continuous corn that's managed in a very industrial way. We've got corn and soybeans in rotation. We've got managed grazing on perennial grasslands. And we've got prairies that have been restored to what was and still is, in my mind, the tall grass prairie. We're here sitting in the middle of the tall grass prairie oak savanna. And so really our project is about trying to understand how best to manage this tall grass prairie oak savanna that we live in, including in the agricultural space, but also in our livable cities and also in our suburban environments and that sort of thing. And so we consider the grassland as the whole biome, not just a patch of grass here and a patch of grass there. And we've got to manage that entire grassland in much better ways. So I can drill down a little bit as we go down the road here onto what I mean by carbon in the soil and what we're finding and that sort of thing. But let me pass it back to Dean Gillaspy.
Okay, and we're going to start on your end and come back this way, just
okay.
to mix it up. So the next question is, what do you think our biggest challenge is in agriculture right now?
Well, our biggest challenge in agriculture, as you said in the introduction around my bio, is how do we care for ourselves? How do we feed ourselves and clothe ourselves and provide fuel for ourselves from the land in ways that actually improve the environment, that actually improve the social fabric that we live in? Right now, agriculture largely is degrading the social fabric and largely is degrading the environment. And that's not to point the finger at anybody. That's just the system that we've developed. That's where we find ourselves. And we have to move forward with a system that is actually building and improving the environment, building the soil, cleaning the water, enhancing and supporting biodiversity, creating good labor relations and good labor conditions, et cetera, et cetera. That's getting a little bit out over my skis when you get into the social dynamics, but they're critically important. And so the main message that I have tonight is that we've got to take an agroecological approach to assessing and evaluating our agricultural systems. That includes the environmental, the social, and the economic dimensions all simultaneously. And that's really hard to do, but that's not a good reason not to do it.
Okay, Rebecca, see if you can drill down a little bit.
I tend to agree with Randy on this, that one of the biggest issues is the sustainability aspect, to throw out that buzzword. And it's part of my job title, looking at dairy sustainability and thinking beyond just the individual plant, which I might produce, but to what does that impact have on the soil, have on the water, have on how we steward the land, and how that impacts the animals, how that impacts the farmers that are growing it. And so really looking at this instead of as bits and pieces, but connecting researchers that are working on all of these different aspects, bringing them together so they're in the same place having a conversation about what does sustainability look like across the board. I think one of the other challenges, if I can add on another one, is that we're now in the age of being able to produce enormous amounts of data, genetic data and otherwise, from agronomic data and whatnot, and being able to manage that data and then parse it out into really meaningful results or bits that we can understand and that we can use and apply, I think is also a big challenge.
Yeah, I think one of the, I would push back on Randy a little bit on some of this stuff here, because I come from a farm. I'm a farm kid from Greene County, just south of here. And I think one of the fundamental challenges that we see in the agricultural sector is this degradation of the community. I would say that, but that's more of a function of the larger society challenges that are impacting farmers. I mean, farmers are given rules and protections that force them to buy seed in a certain way, and this will kind of get into what Julie's talking about too. And then you have to buy certain products in a certain way, and then their protections are only based on these only crops. So it really kind of forces farmers' hands into working in a certain way in order to provide for their family. And I think that's one of the challenges we see across the country. It was funny, I was talking to an individual from a smaller town the other day, and they were super excited, when they got like a dollar store, in their town, because all the local community, all the locals shops had given up because a Walmart came into town. Well, then the Walmart left. Then they were basically gone. They didn't have anything. So I think that's one of the things that's a challenge here with farmers. And Randy and I, we tease each other a lot, and we see things, I think in the bigger picture, we agree on a lot of things that, there's got to be a way for farmers who I truly believe are stewards of the land. They're trying to protect the land, they're trying to protect the water resources, but they're kind of hamstrung in what they're how they can provide for their family.
I couldn't agree more, by the way, and I'm very careful to say that no farmer wakes up in the morning thinking, how can I pollute the water today? And how can I erode the soil today and undermine biodiversity? They're living and working in a system that society has set up for them. We give them signals, and the signals we give are produce more, produce more, produce more, and that's what your incentive is. And then we say along the way, oh, and by the way, here's a little bit of this and a little bit of that for you not to do quite as much polluting of the environment. And it's just not enough. We've got to change the system, and that's a societal problem, not a farmer problem. The farmers have a really important special relationship in our society. They are the ones that we charge with caring for the land, and we've got to take care of them so that they can care for the land. So we agree on that, Sean.
Yeah, we tease each other a lot. So,
Julie.
Yeah, and that leads kind of right into what I was going to say for the challenge, which is that there are many aspects of agriculture where farmers do not have adequate choices to actually respond to climate change or to challenges economically, or if they want to diversify, those options aren't necessarily there, or they're locked into certain choices that the agricultural system that we have present them with. I've been working for the past 3 years with the USDA on a project about fair competition in agriculture, and it's very clear that a lot of farmers wish they had different choices. And I think that's one way the public sector can really be relevant, because we can provide unbiased information so that they have better data to make choices, and we can also provide alternative choices for farmers. It won't happen just through research. You don't do a research project and magically everybody adopts it. Obviously, you really need to change the policy environment as well, in the economic environment. But I do think we can work on producing alternatives so that farmers do have those choices in the next 5 and 10 years. And then obviously work with other groups of stakeholders and the public to change the policy landscape around agriculture.
So I think almost all of you mentioned sociological changes. What about technology? Are there small technological innovations or large ones that would help in this situation?
I think that technology, certainly every new tool that we have helps. I think they're all, in most cases, incremental, but they do provide better options. So I do a lot of participatory research. We're using a new platform to help farmers participate in variety trials that allows smaller independent breeders to get the same kind of data that a larger company might expect from decentralized trials throughout the upper Midwest. We have several hundred growers participating. That certainly wouldn't be possible without the kind of statistics and digital interface that we have there. It's not necessarily going to rival the large companies in terms of the financial resources that they can put into their products, but it does mean that smaller independent breeders and the public sector can get their products out there in front of farmers and have farmers actually see them and potentially use them or give feedback so that those varieties get better. We're working on tomatoes and peppers and a number of different crops that really small seed companies could produce enough seed to meet the needs of a lot of farmers in the upper Midwest if they can get a toehold in the market.
Great.
Sure, and I think most farmers are tech geeks like the rest of us are. We all love technology. We all like the newest toys and bells and whistles. And they really spend time and they lean into UW-Madison and others to really try and learn which technologies actually pay for themselves and which ones don't. And I think that's one of the things that we kind of do, us with extension appointments and others here that don't. You know, that's one of the great things about the Wisconsin idea and, you know, being able to go out and take our research that we learn here on campus and out across the state and the country and the world. But I do know a good example of some technology we utilize right now are a lot of drones in agriculture. Workforce, getting workers in the workforce is challenging enough. You know, if you go to any store, we have kiosks and, you know, there's challenges around that, but they're really a huge issue in agriculture. And being able to go out and properly scout their fields and apply pesticides in a judicious manner. It's really hard to be able to walk 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 acres, but you can now have that technology where you can have a satellite. I don't know if people know this, but satellite flies over every single corn and soybean plant field in the state or the country every 5 to 7 days. Well, we can capture that data, and this is free information that we can capture, utilize this, and then pinpoint and direct drones or you know, the boots on the ground individuals, the scouts directly to those places to really focus their efforts. So there's a lot of really cool opportunities in technology, and I think we're going to talk about AI later, so I won't even talk about that now, but it's exciting to be in agriculture. But as Julie said, it's a tool. You know, we still have to go and do our science and do other things, but these tools make it more effective.
I don't have much more to add to that. I think the technologies that are available really for what we refer to as phenotyping plants, being able to take measurements from plants and be able to do that through IR, UV, like using different light technologies, can help us screen. And for example, we can use that to see differences even in, for example, my research in the plant cell wall, and just be able to get a big snapshot of what a population of a plant looks like. Without having to delve into chemistry, which I think is incredibly powerful and wasn't available, you know, even 10 years ago.
I'll take this opportunity to make a shameless plug from my friend Claudio Graton, who published a paper recently that I was helping him with that leaned into this question about technology and technological innovations. And we talk in that paper about how important technological innovations are going to be moving forward. But critically, we know from history that technological innovations just on their own either aren't enough or drive us down roads that we are then unhappy that we went down. So the Green Revolution is a great example. Amazing, saved millions of lives, amazing technological breakthroughs, but the unintended consequences of crops that were very expensive for some people to buy, crop seed that was expensive for people to buy, reliance on fertilizers and other fossil fuels to make those crops grow, et cetera, are things that we could have and should have anticipated, and now we should for sure moving forward. So what the paper lays out is like, yes, technology, but also ecological innovation, things like cover crops and no-till and grassland on the landscape. And then a third circle that creates a Venn diagram of social innovation. And that social innovation, you mentioned this, we keep talking about sociology. The social innovations are new ways that we come together to kind of govern ourselves and figure out what works and what doesn't, and anticipate what the possible unintended consequences are. And Claudio, in a pithy way, captured all that in what he called agroecological innovation, when you look at those three things simultaneously. And we've got to develop new ways that we come together to do that.
So in Wisconsin, I get asked this a lot. What are we leaders in the ag space? What are we really great at? How are we going to change the world with what it is that we do here in Madison?
Well, you know what I'm going to say. You called me Mr. Grassland the other day on a call, so I'm going to lean into that. I mean, as I said here at the beginning, we're sitting in the grassland biome, and we have to manage it better. And one of the ways that we know now, without any technological advances, that we can manage it better is to restore a lot of the grassland. And okay, prairie, yes, but sometimes not native species necessarily. Grasses that we've brought over from Europe and the Mediterranean region, et cetera, that are very productive in an agricultural context, but nonetheless hold on to the soil and build carbon in the soil and hold on to nutrients, and we can manage it in ways that enhances and supports biodiversity. So the technology's there. We just need the social innovation that helps us move into that sort of space. And that's what this Grassland 2.0 project that I'm helping co-lead with others is all about, is like, how do we overcome the social impediments? Because most of the impediments are socially constructed. You know, people like to say it's economics, but it really isn't economics. It's mostly social construction. It's mostly social impediments. Like, it's hard to be the first one to change. It's hard to make that change that is an implicit indictment of your parents and your grandparents, et cetera. There's all these kinds of issues that are way out of my league in terms of the social science, but they're critical to understanding how we're going to make this change.
And Rebecca, you're newer, and you just went through a process last year to meet a lot of people on campus. So what do you think? How do we lead the way in agriculture?
I think in a couple ways, but one way that really stands out for me now is being part of the Dairy Innovation Hub. I kind of have to make a plug for that because that involves researchers not only at UW-Madison, but also at UW-River Falls and UW-Platteville. And it's a very diverse group of people coming together to do multidisciplinary research in trying to identify ways that we can make the dairy industry more environmentally, economically, and socially sustainable. And so you have researchers who are in the social sciences, you have people studying soil, people who are studying water use, people who are studying animal nutrition and genetics, people like me who are studying plants. And we're all working together and we're collaborating to find ways that we can test our ideas and also work towards sustainability in a lot of areas. And I think it's the first grant or group project that I've heard of like this for dairy, and dairy is so important in Wisconsin. I think it's amazing that the state of Wisconsin decided, in a bipartisan way, we need to fund this research, and it's really important. For me, walking into this department, into the Plant and Agroecosystem Sciences department, it became so apparent how important it was to everyone in the department that they interfaced with farmers and that they were talking to people and that the research that they were doing was meaningful and was applied. And I think in that way, having so many people who are doing research and care so deeply about what the ramifications of their research are or is incredibly important and makes us a leader.
Thank you.
Same question?
Same question.
All right. So I think, what's a good way to start with this? So I think initially what happened...
You can say it, we're a leader in soybeans.
Well, I was going to get there. What I think the interesting thing is it all starts fundamentally when the UW system was built and this whole idea of the Wisconsin idea. I think that's really what really kicked us off. And then from there, there's always been an investment in taking the research we do here within Wisconsin, within UW-Madison, the system, and taking it out, out to the state, out to the nation, out to the world. Then I think one of the things that CALS has done, very wisely over time, is that they've invested in state extension specialists. They've invested in extension. If you look at some of our colleagues, institutions across the Midwest, across the country, they have not invested in that extension specialist, and they've kind of moved more to a research teaching platform. I think that what allows myself and Julie and others like us is that we have that direct connection to the ag industry outside of just the Wisconsin idea. And one of the unique things that I get to do and others that are state specialists is I actually sit on the Wisconsin Soybean Association board. I sit on a board, I listen to farmers, they come to me and they can express concerns. And the flip side, I can go back to them and express my concerns of what's going on within the ag sector. So I think what that gives us is that opportunity for that open dialogue, is that we can have these harder discussions because we know each other. We've been sitting in there. We look across the boardroom, across the table with one another, and we come up with joint solutions. And I think that's one of the unique things that we do. And frankly, back to the soybean thing, thanks, Randy, for plugging this, but I'll throw it out there anyhow. Wisconsin is anywhere between the 12th and the 14th largest state to grow soybeans. So we're not very big. We grow roughly 2.2 million acres. Iowa's 10 million. Illinois is like 2.2 million. But I would put I'll throw it out there, myself and my colleagues together, myself, David Smith, Rodrigo Worley, Matt Ruark on the soil science side, as a team, and I think that's one thing that UW allows us to do, is has a really, there's no silos. We were very open to go across borders, work collectively, and I would put our team up against anybody in the country in terms of how effective we are. And it's because we have those relationships with farmers. We work well across lines, and that's, I think, just an institutional way of hiring and promoting the faculty here. So, yeah, that's my thoughts.
And then, just in case there are some in the audience, they say extension and they're not quite sure what you mean. Why don't you tell the audience how you think about extension?
Sure. So extension, we can go back in the history of extension goes really quick. So back in the good old days, there used to be a county agent or more in every single county. And they used to ride around on motorcycles and just drive around and do meetings, in every little town. Well, eventually this has grown, and we've kind of gone to this regional model. But basically what this is, it's a way for us to take our information, and they can help work with farmers locally. So it's another way of extending the Wisconsin idea, but in a local setting. It's been a great tool, and it's a great opportunity to have that direct connection, and then we get a lot of information flow up through extension that comes in here into CALS in order to help us. Like, okay, what's going on out there, and how can we work to solve these fundamental challenges? And goes back to what Randy was saying. It's environmental, it's social. That was the third one I always forget. Economic. How did I forget that one? That's the most. We talk to farmers. That's the most important one. So yeah.
Yield, and yield.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's great, and we've been blessed to have a really strong extension system in this state as well.
And I would add, from my experience, our extension faculty are a little bit different than the national model. In the national model, there's a lot less emphasis on research and more emphasis on living in rural areas of the state and directly interacting on a daily basis. But my experience here has been there's still a lot of serving of those rural and farming stakeholders, but also the ability to drive high-quality research programs here on campus as well, which is just a unique combination, in my opinion. And Julie, do you remember the question?
Yes, I think so. One of the reasons I think it's such a privilege to work in Wisconsin is because I have always felt I work for the people of Wisconsin and not for an institution that is kind of isolated from the people. I think that one of our biggest strengths is that we have a lot of diversity of crops, diversity of agricultural stakeholders, diversity of other stakeholders, and we value that diversity of ideas and opinions. I think that the problems we're facing are so big that we're not going to have one solution. We're going to need many solutions, many people figuring out different ways of doing agriculture, and some ways will work for some farmers and some ways will work for others, but we're building many options together. And I remember, this is back probably over 20 years now, but something Bill Tracy said really stuck with me. He said, you need a diversity of decision makers. It is not ever sustainable to have one decision maker, whether that's one person at the head of a company or one person at the top of an institution. You need many people that are really working on problems, and I think that's what we have here, both at the university and also with all the farmers and people in Wisconsin that we work with.
Can I build a little bit? Because I think something that Sean said is really key about extension, and he was basically talking about trust. I learned that from my colleague, a social scientist, Mike Bell, who's what Sean was describing is that he has the trust of the farmers, and they trust him, and he trusts them, and so they have a nice dialogue, and the feedback is in both directions. And that is so critical to building these social innovations that I was waving my arms about. And so I think the infrastructure is there and the relationships are largely there. We've got to find ways to support and build them and strengthen them. Sean mentioned there used to be an extension agent in every county in the state. That's no more. I think that one of the problems out in the state is that people feel disconnected from the university in a lot of ways because basically the university has pulled back in a lot of ways as they pulled back some of that extension support. So I think there are opportunities there to build on the existing strength of extension for this social innovation. That's a really key thing. That's all.
All right, so now give us one potential really exciting solution. And you can dream big. And Julie, you'll start.
I don't think there's going to be one solution.
Well, ideally, each of you will mention something different. So not one. Just one that you can
Sean's
think of.
going to say soybeans, and I'm going to say grass.
Yeah, I think options for farmers to diversify, whether that is agroforestry or grasslands or improved management of corn, soy, and other crops. I think that if we actually have viable options that are not too capital intensive, too risky, or just like too unknown, like people will start doing that, and that will allow us to continue to build.
Yeah, this is, we did get a few of these questions up front, and I still have been thinking about this one. This is a tough one to really capture here. And I think, if we're looking at, we have these different layers of solutions. And I think if I was going to go like a larger solution right here, is I think, this is an area that Randy and I would probably agree a lot on, is that, farmers are paid for yield. They're paid for this insurance. Why are they not paid to set us, we have these set-aside land. Why are they not paid to put a certain amount of the production into some other crop and then just set that aside? Initially, it was called set-aside acres. They were initially done that. However, we get into this whole idea of feeding the world, and I'm not even going to go down that road because that annoys me a little bit. But I think what we really need to be able to do is incentivize farmers, and it goes back to the social construct that has been mentioned earlier, to be able to still provide for their family and work as a collective group. And I've seen this in other countries, I've seen this work in other places, and I think this is an area where we can do is just not pit them against one another, because that's kind of the structure we're at right now. And I don't want to sound like a socialist or a communist or anything up there, because I am not. It's too late. I am neither one of those. I'm a capitalist at heart, but I think there's ways that we can work together and have this collective societal impact that I think who doesn't like green space? Who doesn't like those opportunities to go out there? We see this in Madison. There's all these beautiful, great green spaces. Why can't we have that available to us in a larger community out there? So that's just my 2 cents, whatever that's worth. 2 cents, I guess.
I'll take a different tact on this solutions because everyone's been talking very macro scale. I think a lot on the micro scale because I do genetic engineering of crops. And so I think that the one of the solutions comes down to the genetic tools that are available to us now and the incredible things that we can do with them, keeping in mind that it is a tool and it does not replace the need to test these plants out in the field. It does not change the need to talk to farmers about what they will grow and what they want to grow and what their needs are, to ensure that we're continuously asking ourselves the question, well, who is this technology for and why are we creating these different plants? But I think that the genetic tools that are available, and especially since we can now extend those genetic tools beyond what we called model plants, like corn, which has traditionally has had a lot of genetic tools, to non-model plants that are produced on a smaller scale, and be able to extend technologies to those crops as well. And I think that's one of the solutions, particularly when we're talking about improving yield or improving how plants grow or the sustainability of the system.
Thank you.
I'll stay macro and high level just because Sean and I agree, and that's a good place to be. I think it's pretty clear to everybody the elephant in the room is policy, and in particular the Farm Bill, and a massive breakthrough would be a Farm Bill and policy that rewards farmers for doing a whole bunch of things. We call it, in agroecology, we call it multifunctionality, which is kind of boring and doesn't really grab anybody's attention. But it's solving the equation in multiple dimensions simultaneously, which is really hard, but we can do it. We know we can do it. We've got to incentivize that and reward people for doing that, which is what Sean was saying. And that's not socialism, that's capitalism with bounds. You know, you just make the boundaries so that the outcomes are what you want them to be. That's the way we've always done it. And we've got to do that at the highest levels and incentivize diversity and diversification of the landscape, incentivize perennialization of the landscape, especially in key places on the landscape. It doesn't mean we're not going to have corn and beans and we're not going to have annual crops, but there are places where we shouldn't grow corn and beans and annual crops and places where we should have perennial grass. It's also pretty clear that the dairy industry, which is in massive distress, I'll just say it, we shed over 500 dairy farms a year for the last 20 years. That going to perennial grassland and managed grazing for dairy is 4 times as profitable as a confinement approach. It's been showed by economists for years. And there are these social impediments to doing it. You put it in front of dairy farmers and they're like, yeah, that's not the way we do it. Well, we need to be able as a university to shine the light and demonstrate, here's how you can do it. And maybe that's having a research station that's dedicated to doing that and modeling it for people and bringing them and showing them how it can work. The grazing industry and the grassland industry has been doing that on their own in the absence of the university stepping up to that space for decades now. So I think there's a lot of things we can do here at the state level to kind of model it, but obviously at the macro national level, policy changes will be key. Because until the policies change and until there's actual enforcement of antitrust policies that encourage consolidation, we're not going to get out of this, what is fundamentally an environmental morass with our agricultural system. And again, that's a pro-farmer message. That's not an anti-farmer message.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Get off my soapbox for a minute till the next question.
All right, now it's your turn for questions. And I think we have 2 microphones on each side. Yeah, down front.
You've talked a lot about reaching out to farmers and the partnerships there and the importance of policy. What is the university doing in terms of influencing policy, in terms of your relationships with government agencies and officials?
Oh, yeah, let's let Julie start.
Julie.
I'll try not to get in trouble here. I think policy is something that is really important for scientists to engage with. I think there is a hesitation sometimes to do that because you may be seen as partisan, but I think you can engage in policy without being partisan. And that is really how we have to, in my view, try to provide the best information for policymakers, is really focusing on good governance and on policy that works for people on the ground, and avoid the partisan piece that tends to make it very difficult to actually make progress. I've been working in kind of policy adjacent things for a long time, but most recently I've been working with the USDA on a cooperative agreement about fair competition in the seed industry, and that produced a report about the effects of consolidation in the seed industry on farmers, and the idea is to highlight what farmers need and what policy options could get us there. So we are not lobbying Congress, but we are trying to produce a set of policy options that will address some of the problems that we see in agriculture related to farmers not having enough choices. So that, I think, is one way we try to engage, is really working with federal agencies. I'm not the only one on campus that does this kind of thing, and it's really an honor to be able to do that at a federal level, and to have the support of the college to do that. I think we can also engage in policy on a smaller level. There's a lot of decisions that get made locally that are governance decisions, and I know that a lot of us are involved in making sure that if there are questions that need research to answer, we're available to help do that research so that the policies can be made based on what's actually going on the ground and what might actually move the needle in terms of water quality or erosion or other things.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I noticed within the state of Wisconsin, there are certain programs and projects that their research goes directly into state law and statute. For example, it's 82809 is our soil fertility recommendations, and that information then goes right into how the state then works with regulating fertilizer use within the state. So there's a lot of different examples of that with it, not just there, but in other departments and other state statutes. And I know myself and, some of the work that Randy and others do is, we are fortunate, and I know this was kind of got some bad publicity a few years ago, this whole idea about tenure. And we were very fortunate here that we do have tenure in the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and we are protected by UW-Madison because there are things that we publish, science-based, is research-based, that industry does not like, frankly. I mean, I've been threatened, before, saying if you talk about this, you publish this, we'll sue you. And my response was, go ahead and see how many bags of seed you're gonna sell in the state of Wisconsin, sue away. I think they were kind of pushing to see how far they could go. And I think the point there is we have that freedom here this is another great thing about working here at UW-Madison, because I worked at other institutions where you did not have that safety net. I'm not going to name names. You can look at my CV and figure out what those institutions were. That I didn't feel that way, Whereas here, I feel like I am protected. As long as you're leading with science and doing it in the right way and presenting your information, you do have that. And I think we've done things, that have limit products and pesticides and other things that have been deleterious to the environment. And I think it's a good thing. That's part of our job and our role is to kind of have this informed pushback and work with farmers and have that collective voice moving forward and to work in this policy arena. So I'll stop there.
I think this is a little bit more of an indirect way, but we always make sure that policymakers are invited to any workshops or symposia that we do so that they are hearing about the research, and particularly if they're hearing about research from the students that are doing the research and are really passionate about the research. I think that makes more of an impact than, well, I have a big lab and this is the whole research portfolio of what we do, but this student saying, this is my project and this is what I've cared about for the last 5 years of my life, and I've put my blood, sweat, and tears into it, and these are the results that I found, and it shows what the environmental impact of doing X, Y, or Z is. And I think that's going to stick with that policymaker a little bit more of, well, I talked to student X, and these were the results that they found, and I think that this is something that I should listen to and is important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The policy days on the square where the students go up and do posters and talk about their research, I think is really impactful. The main tack we've been taking in the Grassland 2.0 project is to work in local communities in what we call learning hubs, where we're basically starting a conversation around the following question. What do you as a community want and need out of your agricultural system moving forward? What would you like it to be in 30 or 40 or 50 years? What would it look like if it was great? Do you want your kids to come back and take over the farm? What would that farm look like? And so we really try and push this. You take ownership of what the future looks like, and then we can all come together and rally around that vision. And maybe that collective voice is enough that the policymakers can't ignore you anymore, can't ignore us. And we don't know if that's going to work. We have some sociological theory behind us that it might. I think we're starting to see it in the energy sector. The ag sector is a little bit behind, but I think it's coming along. And so it's really about trying to, I know I'm going to sound like a socialist here, but collectivize our voice so that we can overwhelm some of the corporate power that has a grip on these policies. Let's just be honest about what it is. And you know, maybe that's naive, but we gotta try.
In my office as well, I lobby in Washington, and I try to lobby in the states. Very difficult. But the station that Randy mentioned, wouldn't it be great if we had a station where we could show best practices and some new and different forms of agriculture? This is something we'd love to have funded. So we talk to everyone about that, and we also talk to all of our senators and legislatures that will meet with us and offer faculty experts on lots of different topics so that they can have a voice and share their knowledge and best practices. Another question? Yeah.
Yeah, great conversations here. I also had a question around policy and public policy, right? So, and I think you already touched a little bit on it, but I was wondering, how do we incentivize researchers, PIs, graduate students into engaging in the public policy sector, talking to their legislators and like becoming a little bit more active? Because realistically, we use public funds to do our research, and we should be in some form giving back to that. And I know there are a couple outlets already, right? The Graduate Student Research Showcase and the up in the Capitol. But how do we incentivize, because there's a very low turnout in comparison to like how many researchers we have here and how many of them actually engage and try to translate what they're doing into something that's benefiting the state or even like a bigger policy area like the nation.
Julie, why don't you start with what incentivized you?
Sure. I got interested in policy when I was an undergrad. I was a plant science major at Cornell. I started working for a grad student who was doing participatory plant breeding in Honduras with beans, and also with a group working with organic farmers in New York to develop varieties. And I saw how difficult discussions were at that point about what agricultural systems we should have, whether we should have genetic engineering or not. And it seemed like everybody either was in one side or the other, or really didn't engage with the substance. And so it was kind of like the scientists saying, well, trust us. And some farmers were completely on board with that, and some farmers were not at all. And I was curious as to how we could have a better dialogue about that and lead to essentially a research system that would be able to serve all of these farmers. I did an internship in DC after graduating and really got into policy for a year and learned a lot about how policy impacts the choices farmers can make. At that point, I met Bill Tracy and a number of other public sector plant breeders who were really interested in supporting the public sector and offering farmers choices, and started just working with that group and seeing some things slowly move in the right direction in terms of allowing more public sector research that actually developed cultivars that farmers could grow. And you know, it's exciting when something you do kind of has a bit of an impact and then maybe a bit more. And it was also very useful for me as a researcher to understand that no matter what research I do, how good that is, there's a bigger context that has to change. And if I'm not part of that discussion, it is going to happen without me, and it's not necessarily going to be the public sector with the loudest voice.
Anybody else want to chime in? What would better incentivize you and your colleagues to be involved in policy?
Well, I can just start why I'm or how I'm involved in policy is that, again, I mentioned earlier that I grew up on a farm and we lost half of our farm because of bad ag policy. I mean, frankly, that farm is now a subdivision of all things, which is not good. It's kind of why we're seeing a lot of farmland being lost. That's a topic for a different day and a different policy to talk about there. And I think what I've started there initially, seeing that, and then through my work here through Wisconsin, and then sitting on the Wisconsin Soybean Association board, which is a policy board that looks at just policy within the state, but then they have a national board, the American Soybean Association, and just looking at what they work as farmers, and myself having that direct tie when they're talking about policy, I can kind of bring in the science of what we've learned and how that may impact policy. And we can have that communication with the farmers, and then they take that to their representatives and then to the national level. So I'm kind of working at that angle, if you will.
I think that, particularly when you were talking about the grad student level and the turnout wasn't as good as it could be, I think the buy-in for that comes in kind of a top-down fashion. If you're working in a lab with a professor who values policy, then there's going to be more of a push or more incentive for you to go and present your research and be involved in policy. So I think the push should really come at the level of the PI, the professor, of you should want to engage in this. Even if you don't think that your research is going to influence policy based on what you worked on, you can't see that, you should want to be engaged in that.
Yeah, and to that point, I think that's exactly what our new agroecology bachelor's degree is trying to do. It's leaning in that, yes, science, critical, but also policy, also economics, also these social dimensions, and we've got to think about all those simultaneously. So I think there is a bit of a top-down signal to young people, like it's okay to be a scientist and lean into policy. And we've known now for over a decade, no, almost 2 decades, our agroecology master's program has attracted these big brain graduate students who are just like, I'm ready to make change. I want to learn the science, or they come in knowing the science and they want to know how they can be better advocates and get out there and engage in policy. So I think it's signaling from above, if you will, in all these institutional ways that it's okay to advocate, especially for policies that have outcomes that are good for everybody, like clean water and biodiversity. I'm willing to say I'm biased towards those things. And if anybody wants to follow me on Twitter, you can see how biased I am about it and see all the people pile on me for being a biased scientist.
I think we have time for one more question. And it was over here, yeah. A familiar looking person there.
Thank you very much. I have a question on the beginning of the panel discussion and the advances that you think should be made. Maybe a short answer would suffice, since all of you agree on so many things, maybe only one needs to answer. And the question is, do you think that for the state of Wisconsin, technology is ahead of the science?
So I can take a stab at this. So I think the perception among farmers is that technology is ahead of what we are delivering to them. And I think that's just because technology moves so quickly that it's hard for us as scientists to have the rigorous research to say, yes, this works, or no, it doesn't. I think, anybody can do a startup and do some technology and go sell it to a farmer. I mean, you're seeing it right now with all this biological garbage being sold to farmers right now. It doesn't work. Well, I should say it doesn't work. It's not as effective as sold to farmers. So I think there's a lot of technology, and I think we, university, get a bad rap, if you will, for being slow to adopt technology. I don't think that's right. I think we are credible. Let me rephrase it again. We need to be critical stewards of our positions here at UW-Madison, and we can't just come out without having the science to say, yes, this works or NOAA doesn't. So I think from my perspective, is the perception is we're behind, but I don't think in reality we are. I don't know. Someone can disagree with me, but.
All right, I think we're out of time. Let's thank the panelists for a lovely discussion, and we'll be around if you have questions. And thank you for coming out.
Is that it? We're done?
We're done.
Sweet.
But please come up and chat.
And really quick, just a quick thank you as you're getting your things together. Thank you so much to Dean Gillaspy and all of our panelists for this inspiring conversation. Thank you to all of you for being here with us tonight. On behalf of the organizers of this year's Wisconsin Science Festival, I'd like to thank all of the wonderful sponsors, host venues, volunteers, and presenting organizations. None of this would have happened without your generous support. Again, this is just the first day of the Science Festival, so I encourage you to continue exploring what events are yet to come this week. Visit wiscifest.org to find out more. Also, the next Crossroads of Ideas event is coming up on November 21st, featuring astrobiology and astrochemistry. You can add your email address to the list at the welcome table to stay informed about upcoming programs. Thank you again, and let's give one final round of applause to our presenters this evening.